What you peeping at? Shut up, I'm doing a take. Listen, carrying concealed is a responsibility. It is a responsibility to both be safe and proficient with your weapon, as well as being responsible with how you're carrying that weapon. I know carrying a weapon for the first time can be scary, sticking a loaded gun in your pants, and that's okay. You should take it seriously. So I'm not going to be the guy that starts tearing you apart because you're not ready to carry a round in the chamber just yet, and you're asking questions as to what is the best way to carry, or you're just not ready for some of that responsibility. That's okay. But the goal is to get you there. I want you all to be studs, confident studs, handsome studs if you can pull it off. I can't. And so I've got some tips and tricks that helped me get to that point. First, we're going to cover some foundations, belt, holsters, things like that, because that is going to dramatically increase your confidence and the safety, of course, of carrying a loaded firearm. So the first thing for carrying a concealed firearm is having a good holster. There's a lot of holsters out there. Kydex has come a long way. I am always going to be recommending Kydex. I think that is the safest, most effective way to carry a firearm. However, I am just some guy on the internet. If you want to carry leather, that's your prerogative. Leather can sometimes, over time, form to the gun. That's one of the reasons why people like it so much. However, my first holster was a leather Kydex combo. What happened is the leather started to form into the trigger guard. And so when I holstered it, it would start tickling the trigger. And that's when I knew I had to change. I was no longer confident with that. I wanted the full Kydex. Kydex offers superior retention. It is molded around the gun, it's custom made for your gun, and it's adjustable. If you are worried about your firearm falling out of your holster, one of the first things to do is tighten it down. Maybe tighten it down more than you normally would. Just know you're going to have to give that a tug when you're unholstering it. But as you are learning, if that is what is keeping you from carrying because you're afraid that your gun is going to fall out of your holster, tighten those screws down. All you need to do is tighten some of those screws that are made for retention, and that adjusts the retention on your holster. Sometimes there's some rubber washers that go along with it as well that you can increase or decrease your retention with. Some very reputable brands, T-Rex Arms, they make a lot of really good holsters, as well as Tier 1 Concealed. I've loved their appendix style holster. Good in there! GCode, as well as LAS Concealment. Those are some top ones. There's so many different options. There's no reason why you should be using a bad holster to carry a gun. If you can't find a holster for the gun that you're looking for, you might be carrying an eclectic gun. Something that I recommend before buying a gun is make sure that the holster company that you're looking at, or at least one of them, carries the holster that you're looking for. Because if you buy a very eclectic gun and you can't get a holster for it, then you're going to resort to some universal holster that honestly sucks dick. So your next foundation piece is going to be your belt. I know a lot of people are very uncomfortable with carrying because they don't have the right belt to hold their gun. They have a regular leather belt and it starts to sag. That's uncomfortable. Your gun starts to sit a little cattywampus within your holster, and then maybe it's falling a little bit below your shirt line and it's a little bit more visible, or it's completely visible. Holsters have to be accompanied by a solid belt. It will pay dividends in the end. There are loads of belts that you can do. Just type in gun belt. One of the things you're going to be looking for is stiffness and rigidity. That is going to make sure that your holster doesn't push down your belt like this. I'll asterisk in some other stuff maybe. But it keeps your holster from sagging, and it also makes sure that it's not bouncing around if you're moving a lot. I can run at full speed, and I know my gun is not going to fall out of my holster because I've got a good holster and I've got a good belt to keep it from bouncing around. That is the piece that a lot of new people oftentimes skip, is that good solid belt. A good solid gun belt is going to run you about maybe $80, $90. But if you're going to be carrying a gun, that is absolutely a component that you need. There are a lot of amazing belts out there. I don't know all of them. Everyone has their favorite. Drop your favorite down in the comments below so that we can all learn from each other. I have always used an Elite Survival Systems belt. I've used this for about 9 years. It was $80. It's got a Cobra buckle on it, so it's a little bit, it's a little bit loud. However, they also make plenty of leather belts that are a little bit more maybe business casual or just casual, so they're not so in your face. If that's something you're looking for, you work in an office, you can get one in black, you can get one in brown, and then usually they have deals for both of those, and you can save a little bit of money. Maybe for $120, you can get a black gun belt and a brown leather gun belt. That way you've got something to wear every single day, so you can carry every single day. Another thought on holsters, especially if you work in an office, you're probably going to be tucking in your shirt. So having a good holster with the right clips so you can tuck in your shirt is going to be advantageous, or else your shirt's going to be all, cattywampus and weird or scrunched up around the holster. They make tuckable clips. Most of them are just like a J-hook style. So your shirt tucks in behind the clip and then in front of the holster. So you'll have two clips on your belt. If you have a black belt, you usually don't see them. But if you're wearing maybe like a sports coat or a jacket or a suit, that's not going to be seen. So final bit on the foundation piece is practice your draw. Bye. Don't just put your gun in your holster, load it up and be ready to go. Practice your draw so you're confident with it. You're going to want to have a good touch point so you're grabbing it in the right place every single time. Have a good confident grip on that, and also film yourself. That way you can draw and point and then reholster, and you can review that footage and see if you're flagging yourself unnecessarily. Carrying appendix, sometimes a lot of people point their gun into their guts. We want to avoid that as much as possible. So oftentimes you see one of these, the little bit of pelvic thrust. I do that a lot, especially when I've got a lot of shirts on. Pelvic thrust, so I can point it a little bit more away from my body. Obviously, we want to make sure that we're not shooting yourself, but we want to take every precaution and being safe, because accidents do happen. If you have an accident in a safe direction, it's going to be good.
Are you sure about that?
Man, I don't know if I should have put that in there or not. Be safe. So, carrying with a round in the chamber. This is a huge point of argument on the internet. Huge! Should you carry with a round in the chamber? Should you not? I think the main idea is it's faster to carry with a round in the chamber. Of course, you can be very proficient with drawing your weapon, racking it, and getting on target, but sometimes you don't have that luxury. However, do what you want, but my goal for you is to get to the point where you feel confident carrying with a round in the chamber. If you're not ready right now, that's okay. I'm not going to tear you apart. There's so many forums and Facebook pages where they will just tear you apart because you're not ready. That's all right. But the goal is to get you there. One of the things that really helped me is I carried a Glock. Make sure this is safe. What I did was I took it, I racked my gun, so my trigger was prepped. That way, if it went off, if it clicked, nothing's gonna happen. So I racked it and put the mag in. Why would I do that? The whole point of me doing that is to make sure that I didn't have any bad habits, or I was doing something that might cause my gun to go off in case I was going to have some sort of negligent discharge, to identify any bad habits that I had. If I knew throughout the course of the day my trigger was pulled, I know I've done something wrong. Pulling it out of my pants, maybe when I was going to the bathroom, I was handling my firearm incorrectly. And so that's a point to learn with no consequences. That helped me a lot. Do that as long as you need to feel comfortable, because if you go 6 months and that trigger hasn't been pulled, you know you're doing something right. However, if you go throughout your day and your trigger pulled, you need to go back and you need to identify what caused that. Was it somehow catching on clothing? Were you fiddling with your gun? Do you have a bad holster? Whatever it might be, identify what that problem is. That way you don't run into it in the future. That was one of the biggest things that helped me feel confident. I also did that with my draw. I had my trigger pressed just like that, draw. That way if I'm drawing and then maybe my finger is going to my trigger a little too quickly, I know that, oh wow, my trigger was pulled before I had my gun up and my sights were on my target. I need to adjust how I draw my gun. I need to adjust my trigger pull. Fucking get in there. Get in there. Fuck. Next is bathrooms. If you're a guy, you use a urinal. If you're carrying appendix, which is extremely popular, then how are you going to use that urinal? There's a gun there. Do you pull it out? Here it is. Here it is. Shocking, I know. Use the stall. Go right into the stall. You can take your gun out. You can hold it, put in whatever you got to do, and then go to the bathroom. Don't be the guy that takes his gun out of his holster, puts it on the toilet behind him, starts scrolling through his phone as he's shitting, and then stands up, buckles it up, and leave. If you're not used to carrying with a gun, then that might be one of those things that you might forget. Here is my pro tip. If you go and use a stall, I always sit down in there, whatever, call me a bitch, whatever. It's just easier. I'm going to sit down and I take my gun and I put it in my pants. That way there's no way that I'm going to be leaving my gun behind. If I pull up my pants, there's a Glock next to my cock. Kind of like that line. That was whole improv. And so I'm going to pull that out. I'm going to reholster it. And that is going to make sure that you never leave your gun behind, because you see it on the news. You don't want to be the guy that leaves his gun in the office and then you're on the news and you're the talk of the town. That is not safe. We do not want somebody getting a hold of your gun. So put it in your pants. Be safe. Be responsible. It's a tiny little thing. If you're sitting down to go pee, who gives a fuck? You're not leaving your gun behind. Next is you're probably going to be touching your gun a lot when you are carrying for the first time. Those first couple months, you're touching your gun, making sure it's there. That isn't something that we want to be doing. It's not the end of the world if you do. Most people don't know, but that is a habit we want to grow out of. A lot of people, when they're carrying at like the 5 o'clock, I know I got into that habit a lot because my shirt always goes up and over my gun, so I constantly have to pull my shirt down. I found myself messing with my gun a lot. If that's something you have, consider carrying appendix, because your shirt is less likely to come up. You've got a little bit more control of what's in front of you. You can see your hands can be a little bit more casual. And so if you're just sitting here and you got your arms touched, arms crossed like this, then you can kind of touch your gun and know that it's there. And then you also have a lot of control right up here. If you're worried about someone coming up behind you and touching you, then that's something you can do. I remember I was standing in line for Thanksgiving at Chuckarama. Bougie, I know. I was standing in line in Chuckarama. I had a big long jacket on and pulled it close, and some guy walked up behind me and he put his hand on my gun. He couldn't see my gun, but my handle was bulging out of my jacket a little bit, so it was making a shape because I had my jacket pulled tight around me. So he's like, wow, I hope that's not a gun. And it's like, well, what if it was? Are you going to be touching my goddamn gun? My excuse, and I learned this from a long time ago from James Yeager, which was an old gun tuber. I know he's controversial, but this was a really good comment that he had. That his excuse was, well, that's my colostomy bag. And then nobody will ask about it ever again. I did the same thing to the guy, and boy, he stepped away from me. Oh, I'm sorry. And that was it. We don't want to be showing that we're carrying a gun to everybody. So that's one of those easy excuses if they do notice a little bit of a bulge. Right at first, you might be very worried about printing and things like that. Clothing choice is going to help with that. Winter makes it very easy. You've got jackets, you've got extra shirts on. But in the summertime, if you're just wearing a t-shirt, make sure it's not one of those t-shirts from high school that are maybe coming up a little high and you should get rid of it. That's your home clothing. I always buy a size larger for both my pant size because you're putting a gun in there. It'll make it more comfortable. Do it. Do it! There you go. As well as my shirt to make sure it's a little bit longer. And then inevitably, within about a year, that shirt is shrunk a little bit from drying it, and I just replace them after that. Button-ups are usually a little bit longer, and they have a little bit more texture to them. If you are someone who is a fan of flannel and patterns, that's going to help break up the shape of your gun printing. So if you're very uncomfortable about that, you have maybe strict printing laws, then having patterned clothing is going to break that up a lot. And those button-up shirts are going to be a little bit longer and giving you a little bit more concealability. Finally, be confident in your gear. That's going to mean handling it, using it, being familiar with your weapon manipulations, and going out to training. So just like a brief little aside, don't be that guy at the bar that acts all macho because you've got a gun, and then someone like wants to fight you and squares up to you, and then you're like, oh yeah, and you pull your gun out and put it on the table like you're a big macho man that you don't need your gun for this fight. Don't be that guy. Well, everybody, thanks for sticking around. I hope that you were able to glean a little bit of a knowledge from this video. For you steely-eyed veterans out there, maybe I missed something. You've got a pro tip. Put it in the comments so that we can all learn together. And maybe we stumbled upon a gem. You never know. I'll see you all on the next one. God damn, it's fucking cold out here. My hands are cold. I'm thirsty. I slipped and I hit my knee. Consider subscribing. Now, I just wanted to take a little bit of time and read one of my favorite comments from the week. This is going to be a new section that we do. This is from John L-CZQG. Thank you. You must be Antifa, seeing how you are wearing all black. like a maroon. Like a maroon. I think you mean moron. All right, but we'll let that slide, John. 3 exclamation points. Like a maroon, 3 exclamation points. Very passionate. But I guess maybe you like looking like a target. Exclamation mark, LOL. Well, first, thank you for your comment, John. Very cool. I will have you know I do have multicam, like a good little boy at the time ever calls for it. However, I can assure you, no paper targets are hunting me as I'm out here LARPing in the wilderness. I'll be okay. Thank you for your concern. I'll see you on the next one, John. Do my glasses match my big red nose right now because I'm so chilly? Feeling like fucking Rudolph out here, bro. I'm not usually a fan of orange drinks, but this Monster Orange Dreamsicle is really doing it for me.